From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. We start in Barbados, where the opposition leader Mia Mottley continues to call for Prime Minister Frondell Stewart to set the date for elections. Mottley, who's the head of the Barbados Labour Party, said in an open letter to the Prime Minister that the country is crumbling and grinding to a halt because of his tardiness, indecisiveness and inertia. Barbados' parliament dissolved in March and elections must be held before June 4th, but the Prime Minister shows no signs of calling the date.
Prime Minister, our country is drifting and our people are suffering. Our institutions are reeling. Problems abound and you appear indifferent to the realities of the plight of our people. Our condition is just getting worse. I am not even minded to speculate now as to what these 90 days are really all about. You and your cabinet are not attempting to solve any problems. I'm asking you, sir, in the name of all that is good and righteous, call the election.
Now, for more on this dispute over the elections in Barbados, we are being joined live from Bridgetown by Peter Wickham. He's a political scientist at CADRES, which is the Caribbean Development Research Services. Peter, thank you so much for joining us. Could you start by explaining to our viewers the constitutional process in Barbados? Once Parliament is dissolved in March, which is 5 years after it first met, the Prime Minister has 90 days to call an election. So technically, he's still within the parameters of the Constitution. So why is there anxiety?
Yeah, technically he is. And I mean, there's no question that he is within the four corners of the law. We have a convention in the Westminster system that says that this 90-day period is normally used in the event of major emergencies. And if you look across the region, there have been very few precedents. In 2015, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago did use the 90 days, but she stated expressly at the dissolution of Parliament that she would use the 90 days. In Antigua Barbuda in 2014, the part of the 90 days was used because there was a court decision that was affecting boundaries that the Prime Minister was waiting for. The problem with Barbados is that we are facing the first time in regional history where Parliament has dissolved itself, through an act of the Prime Minister, has dissolved itself, and the Prime Minister is yet to say when the election will be called. So the problem is that we are in limbo in that we don't have a parliament and we don't know when the election will be held. And this is a regional first. I think it is unconventional. It is not consistent with the finer traditions of Westminster democracy that we adhere to across the region.
And also, Peter Wickham, it's also not necessarily good political practice because in 2015, as you mentioned, with Kamala Persad-Bissessar in Trinidad, she tried it, but it didn't work for her. So what is Prime Minister Frondell Stewart thinking?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the problem, because as I look at all of the other instances in which, and I actually did an assessment, generally longer terms result in defeat. Prime Minister Stewart is now almost at the 63rd month of what should be a 60-year term. And generally speaking, it spells defeat. The polls are looking very bad for him. Strategically, it doesn't make sense, especially as Ms. Mottley said, there's not anything that we can say that he's doing while he's there to make things better for him long term. So, I mean, we keep asking what is the strategy, and he keeps saying that he has the time legally, and really it's a question of his legal right, and it's not a question of political strategy. So I draw a blank where that one is concerned as far as the strategy. I think it's highly unwise politically, and I think he will pay dearly for it.
Because I remember earlier you saying that it seems that he's pushed it down so he could attend the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting as Prime Minister. And we really at a loss of the strategy. Why hasn't his political party kind of forced him into action? Because clearly they know there's no precedent in the Caribbean for this being a good political move.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is rumored that the party put pressure on him not to go to the Commonwealth Conference. The feeling is that he wanted to go, and it is argued that the party put pressure on him not to go. So maybe there was some pressure brought to bear there. But I've noticed that within the cabinet, I mean, I think the guys are now, and ladies are so constrained by what's going on nationally and their attempt to defend it in the public domain, that they keep taking a position that, you know, it is right. I don't know what's going on behind the walls of cabinet where people are putting pressure on it, but I understand that pressure was brought to bear to encourage him not to attend either the Lima conference or alternatively the Commonwealth conference.
Now, we started our newscast with Mia Motley saying that the Prime Minister needs to put the people out of their misery. Do you think the opposition is capitalizing on this? Do you think the opposition is capitalizing well on this uncertainty?
Yeah, the opposition has been walking an interesting line because since the dissolution of Parliament was imminent, they have not said anything about it until now. And I think that that is entirely reasonable because there was a feeling before that they were rushing to get to an election. I think that her position now is that, we just let him burn himself out. And her demand that he call an election immediately right now is really neither here nor there because in 2 weeks' time, he will not have a choice. Basically, in 2 weeks' time, the election will call itself. So I think that what she's doing now is perhaps encouraging him to push himself further because he seems to like to do the opposite of what she tells him to do. So if this is the case, then her telling him no to call it will mean that he will basically let it call itself in another 2 weeks. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes down to the wire like this. But as I said, politically, it makes no sense.
Exactly. And Peter, since we are speaking to you and you're from Cadres, which is a polling company, tell us, what are you predicting for the results? And in terms of seats for the opposition and the government?
I mean, I'm not yet at a seat prediction, but the swing that I am seeing is significant. We've had two landslides, one in 86 and one in 99. For both the DLP and BLP. And the swings that we are seeing now are of proportions that are significantly greater than both 86 and 99. I don't know what will happen after because the DLP has had an amazing capacity to bounce back in the past. Maybe they will be able to recover some ground. But right now, it's not looking good for them. And I think that we're seeing historic level of movement away from the Democratic Labour Party, which would mean a landslide against them.
Thank you so much, Peter, for chatting with us. We've been speaking to Peter Wickham of Cadres, which is a political research company based in Barbados. Other news now. Protests continue in Mexico after police announced they found the bodies of 3 film students who had been missing for a month in the western state of Jalisco. Demonstrators say they don't believe the official version of events and also criticize the authorities' decision to place fences in the streets to stop protests. Police say the students were killed and doused with acid by members of the New Generation Jalisco cartel. Some argue the murders will be used to influence the outcome of the elections. And our correspondent in Mexico City, Pablo Perez, brings us the latest details on this case.
So after demonstration both here in Mexico City and Guadalajara, the capital of Jalisco, of support and protest against the violence in Mexico, because of the case of the 3 missing students in Jalisco, there's still movement on the social networks supporting the family's claim that the state attorney is trying to force close the case in a way very much likely of the Ayotzinapa case 3 years ago, because of the political tone that has taken over this case of the missing film students. So they are demanding scientific proof that the students were executed and dissolved in acid, such as the state attorney said, because otherwise the family say the attorney is only working with expectations, not real facts.
Thank you, Pablo Perez, for that report. And between disappearances and violence, Mexican citizens are feeling less and less secure every day in their own cities.
Going out on the streets or using public transportation have become risky activities for Mexicans. According to a poll made by the National Statistics and Geography Institute, 9 out of 10 citizens expressed fear of moving around their own cities.
There is more crime and violence now. My son was robbed outside our own house.
You feel watched. They check what you're carrying. You can't feel safe.
Cops don't make you feel safe, even when they're around.
President Enrique Peña Nieto admits his policies have failed.
These are the failures and lessons that these policies have left us. They are still not correct and haven't worked as we expected.
Social organizations highlight the negative effects the government's strategies for the military and the police have had.
We went to war with Mexico's rule of law by implementing an absurd war against drug trafficking that has collapsed this country, that has weakened every institution. The worst is that we still don't want to face up to it.
This issue is on every candidate's agenda for the coming election, but with very different tones.
There is only one candidate, left-wing Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who proposes to end this routine of reacting to violence with more violence.
According to the Statistics Institute, Mexicans feel more insecure each year. This after more than 10 years of the so-called war against drug trafficking, which has left more than 200,000 dead and 33,000 missing.
In Nicaragua, the National Assembly has made a call for peace and dialogue amid the violent climate provoked by demonstrations against Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega. This resolution is aimed to support the dialogue process opened by the government with the private sector and workers after a week of protests that left over 10 people dead. The dialogue will be mediated by Cardinal Leopoldo Brenes, who asked for each side to stop violence in order for the talks to work.
Nicaragua's Episcopal Conference, after praying and listening and asking for direction from the Holy Spirit, accepts the role of mediator and witness of the dialogue requested by President of Nicaragua, Daniel Ortega Saavedra. To ease the climate for dialogue, we believe it's essential and mandatory that the government, as well as each member of civil society, avoids any kind of violence.
The Nicaraguan government expresses gratitude to the Catholic Church for offering to mediate in the conflict. Nicaraguan Vice President Rosario Murillo highlighted the will for tolerance brought by Cardinal Leopoldo Brenes.
We deeply thank the disposition on behalf of His Eminence the Cardinal Leopoldo Brenes and all the bishops to continue bringing to the table tolerance and peaceful coexistence to our country.
Meanwhile, vigils have been held for those killed during the protests. One of the 2 police officers killed during the protest has been buried in her hometown, Jinotepe, near the Pacific coast. Officer Juana Aguilar Cano was just 19 years old.
It's really sad for a human life to be lost in this way. The loss of an innocent life like this is dreadful. The police were simply doing their job, carrying out their functions and safeguarding the country.
And there have been demonstrations in Guatemala demanding the resignation of President Jimmy Morales. This happened after new evidence was revealed showing that in 2015 he received illegal electoral funding.
After the Public Ministry of Public Affairs determined that President Jimmy Morales was involved in electoral crimes, hundreds of indigenous groups from the Campesino Development Committee, CODECA, arrived in the capital to demand his resignation.
Jimmy Morales is a political criminal. He has stolen education and health services from the people. We can't have criminals in the government. That's why we have taken the streets, because we are tired of being governed by criminals.
The Campesino demonstration gathered in front of the National Palace, Congress, and the Supreme Court of Justice. The demonstrators called for the businessmen involved to also face justice. They gave almost $2 million to the Morales campaign that were not reported to the Electoral Tribunal. The businessmen have confessed the unauthorized donation.
They are getting richer while there are a lot of poor people, and we are now in front of a building that actually belongs to us, the National Palace.
The country is in a similar crisis to that of 2015. Back then, it ended with the resignation of President Otto Pérez Molina. Campesino groups insist that new laws must be created to prevent corruption in the future.
What the Guatemalan people need is to get rid of all the corruption, or we are going after the National Constituent Assembly.
Following the accusations of illicit electoral funding, the Ministry of Public Affairs will request the Electoral Tribunal sanction the FCN Nación Party, which was the party that took Jimmy Morales to the presidency.
We'll take a short break now, but join us again after this. Look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has been campaigning in the northern state of Carabobo, where he's being greeted by large crowds. The campaign officially launched on Monday with a message of peace, economic prosperity and social protection for an independent Venezuela. President Maduro also spoke about his plan for a monetary conversion that will begin on June 4th as an important tool to overcome the economic war.
Maduro has been fighting against this economic war that they are waging. Every day it's like a bottleneck. They keep closing the opportunities to try to make us Venezuelans desperate.
Nicolas Maduro solve their differences. They are also calling on
who they claim are guerrillas of the ELN. His opponent, Efrain Alegre, lost in a allegation. And the Paraguayan opposition leader, Efrain Alegre, announced his party is going to check every ballot sheet and every vote to prove what he said to explain their decision to scrap the scheme. Two judges from New York and San Francisco had break, but join us again after another look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Each plan. Here's more on that and other big stories.
First, Ramaphosa sees it as a step to tackle labor intents for murdering Swedish journalist Kim Wall.